And so here, what they've done is they've shut down these magazines because the magazines speak to topics that are of interest to women and Black people, in part, and not exclusively, right? These are not magazines that have any kind of discriminatory policies when it comes to their content. They have readers of all races and genders. They have contributors of different races and genders. They have editors who are not women, who are not Black in some cases. But the university said, that doesn't matter, because just sort of in some general sense, they might be sort of disproportionately of interest to particular groups, or they may focus on particular topics. That's enough. And so, that's just straightforwardly unconstitutional under existing Supreme Court precedents.
Alrighty, welcome back. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. And, the great thing about having a relationship with the folks at the Southern Poverty Law Center is you call them up and say, hey, we've got some issues that we would like to understand better. Do you have anybody who could talk about it? And they never say, no, we don't know, because they're always involved in these things and the important issues. And here's two. How about two people who can talk about these things? And so we have Jerome Dees, who is the Alabama Policy Director for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And Jerome has joined us before. We're always happy to have Jerome on with us. He's a fantastic guest. And Sam Boyd. Sam, I believe this is your first time, if I'm not mistaken, on here. All right. Yes. So, Sam is the Senior Supervising Attorney at the Southern Poverty Law Center. And I know Jerome has been involved with the SAVE Act and what's been taking place with that. And Sam has been involved with the University of Alabama students' lawsuit against the university over the shutting down of a couple of student-led magazines there on campus. So I tell you what, let's start with Jerome and the SAVE Act. And I know these are two kind of separate things, but we're gonna handle it both. Listen, we're professionals here, so we can do this. So the SAVE Act, I've read through this. I've read through what it does, and as somebody who is in the unique position of just recently having traveled overseas. And it was the first time I had gone overseas. And it was the first time my daughter, who's 8, had gone overseas. And so we all needed new passports. And so I have a very unique understanding of what primarily my wife went through, but because she had also not had a passport since she changed her name since we've been married. And so I learned the time it takes, the amount of trips you have to make to different places, and most importantly, the expense you have to incur to do this. And I bring all this up because as part of the SAVE Act, the way that you can prove your citizenship is very, very limited in order to register to vote. One of the ways is by producing a passport. If you don't, then you've got to produce an original birth certificate along with your state-issued ID. All of these things cost money and time and effort. Jerome, what is the average person looking at, and what will this do to the voters out there who have not registered? What, in terms of disenfranchisement, this is one of the worst things I think I've seen since poll taxes.
Well, Josh, you kind of start off by taking a lot of the talking points that
I'm sorry. I didn't.
But no, I mean, you're absolutely right on that. This is kind of a bureaucratic approach to voter disenfranchisement and oppression. Very similar to kind of what we saw years ago, generations ago in Jim Crow, where there wasn't kind of an outright stripping of access to the polls, but lots of different little administrative and bureaucratic hurdles that you had to jump over and through in order to actually be able to realize that right to vote. And so some of the things that you mentioned that are those hurdles present in the SAVE Act are documentary proof of birth certificate or being able to present a passport. And we know that actually millions of Americans do not have ready access to either of those documents. If you look at across the American citizenry, about 69 million women don't have access to a birth certificate. 146 million people do not have a passport. And so just looking at those raw numbers alone, that is a sizable number of Americans that would automatically uh, be prevented from actually being able to go to the polls and be able to exercise their right of self-governance, the ability to go in and select the candidate of their choosing, the opportunity to vote.
Yeah, it just the other thing that why? I mean, yeah, that's the thing. What you know, what? I mean, that's a pretty. I know it seems like a simple question, but like, what? Why? Why are we doing this?
One can really only speculate and with two attorneys as your guests, we know the one thing that attorneys don't like to do is speculate on the record. But honestly, what we have seen over the course of the past decade plus, really since the Shelby v. Holder decision, is government officials attempting to select their the people that they represent, as opposed to the people that they represent being able to choose their elected officials. We've seen that through gerrymandering. We've seen that here in our very own state. Back in, I want to say 2014, 2015, when we saw the closure of DMV offices in primarily black belt counties, where oftentimes those are the only places you could get the photo voter ID needed to be able to go to the polls and vote. And now in 2026, we're seeing a lot of those same kinds of policies and practices attempting to be implemented. Individuals who have been elected then attempting to press their thumb on the scale and say, no, we don't want everybody to be able to freely participate in the democratic process. We want to be able to pick and choose the types of individuals that are actually able to vote. And so without getting too much into the speculation, you think about the types of individuals from a socioeconomic standpoint that would be able to have the financial resources to purchase a passport or already having their possession a passport. For those who do not have ready access to their birth certificate, the cost to go down to your local county Department of Health and purchase that, the time that it takes to be able to go down there and get it, or the freedom to be able to take time off of work or have a flexible schedule to even get down to the necessary government office to get that. Not everybody has that ability to just on a random Tuesday or Thursday stop what they're doing, go down, take the hours to sit, get the queue, wait in line, get the documents that you need, and then go.
Especially for no reason at all.
Exactly.
There's no fraud.
Well, but I think there is a reason why this is happening, and I think we all know, especially when it comes to the current president, why it's happening. Now, I understand, Jerome, your job is not to speculate and pontificate. That's what Josh and I get paid to do. Your job is to advocate and litigate. So I understand why you're being careful. But I'm going to say directly that this is because Donald Trump wants to make sure that he has as much control as he can over staying out of prison. That's what I think this has to do with, in terms of trying to control who can vote, so that he hopes to control who's in Congress so that he can not be impeached and imprisoned. That's what I think this is about, ultimately, from his standpoint. But what I want to ask you is this. What is the SPLC and other advocacy organizations, what do you plan to do if Congress does indeed pass this and try to enact this heinous legislation?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that we can do if it does get passed, and obviously there are a number of hurdles right now present in DC. They've been debating this for a while. It looks like the Republicans in Congress would likely have to blow up the filibuster in order to be able to actually get this passed. Negotiations around it have been kind of tied in with DHS and ICE funding. So there are a lot of different things that have to fall into place just so before we even get to that point. But if we arrive at a scenario where that arrives, part of what I feel that our responsibility would be is to push on local and state governments to make sure that the types of documentation that would be required are easily and readily accessible to every registered or eligible voter in that particular jurisdiction. If we are going to present these types of hurdles and barriers to folks for verification, or as the phrase is often tossed around, voter integrity purposes, then we need to make sure that those documents are also easily accessible for the mother of three who's working two jobs but lives in Camden, Wilcox County, and there's not a whole lot of places for her to go. I believe that that is first and foremost sort of what is incumbent upon us, is to apply the pressure to our state governments and make sure that that's accessible.
Well, let me come at it from another direction. In your opinion, is the SAVES Act constitutional?
That's a good question. I pause primarily because from a practical standpoint, because I live sort of more on the policy side nowadays than on the legal side. And so my brain naturally goes to kind of what is allowable, what is actually likely to be enforced. And what I mean by that is the courts of 2026 are not the courts of 2013, are not the courts of 1992, are not the courts of 1964.
Ain't that the damn truth?
There are a number of things where I think back to when I was sitting in constitutional law class at the great University of Alabama School of Law. Josh, I had to get my plug in. And I think back through all of the courses or cases that we went over in that time, about to date myself, 2010, 2011, and how much of that case law is now completely irrelevant. And so I think that's kind of one of the challenges for a lot of practicing civil rights attorneys now, is like, okay, I know this is what the precedent is that I've studied, that I have practiced, and has been my experience over the past 10, 15 years. But when I go before Court of Appeals, when I go before trial court, when I go before the Supreme Court, if my case gets there, what is actually going to be the order and ruling from the court, despite all of the evidence and case law that I present to them? I know that's kind of the most lawyer answer that you can get, but I mean, from a practical standpoint, that's a lot of what we're facing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and Sam, I
Okay.
want to get to you too here, because I think a lot of what we're talking about applies to what's taking place at the University of Alabama as well. In a different way, because we have some student led magazines that were shut down there, primarily dealing with it was women's issues and African American issues, right? What they focused on. And they shut them down. This is after they've done other things related to the anti-DEI push, which, speaking of, you want to talk about courts changing? Who in the world ever thought that we would be sitting around in 2026 saying, oh, diversity, equity, and inclusion is awful. Oh my God, it's so terrible. It's the worst thing we've ever had. We've got to stomp that out. So what, I've read through the stories about the lawsuit. I looked over the lawsuit as well. Where do you feel like the legal leg to stand on is with that lawsuit? What can y'all specifically push back against? Because I know y'all, the SPLC is part of this lawsuit. You're representing the 8 students who filed this thing.
Yeah. So I think that there's sort of 2 primary things here, right? So one is the Supreme Court has said pretty unambiguously that shuttering student magazines because of their content is unconstitutional. So there's a Supreme Court case called Rosenberger, where a university said, we don't want to fund this student magazine because it's Christian. We don't want to be, involved in supporting religious speech because we think that violates the Establishment Clause. And the Supreme Court said, not only does it not violate the Establishment Clause because you're just funding independent student speech, and then the students are deciding whether or not to advocate a religious message. In fact, once you've created what's called a limited public forum or a public forum, a designated public forum, which is an area the university has opened up for speech. So it's not, the university isn't deciding who says what. It's saying we're going to provide some funding, and then we're going to let students do whatever they want to do in that forum. In this case, the forum would be like the student publication office. They can't censor that speech on the basis of viewpoint. And so here, what they've done is they've shut down these magazines because the magazines speak to topics that are of interest to women and Black people, in part and not exclusively, right? These are not magazines that have any kind of discriminatory policies when it comes to their content. They have readers of all races and genders. They have contributors of different races and genders. They have editors who are not women, who are not Black in some cases. But the university said, that doesn't matter because just sort of in some general sense, they might be sort of disproportionately of interest to particular groups, or they may focus on particular topics. That's enough. And so, that's just straightforwardly unconstitutional under existing Supreme Court precedent. So that's the first piece. And then the second piece is the reason they say they're doing this is because there was guidance from the department, even the Attorney General, saying basically, you can't fund things that use unlawful proxies for race discrimination. So the theory was, because you're funding these magazines that appeal to certain groups, that's the same thing as discriminating. But even that guidance doesn't require this. It doesn't require defunding student organizations just because they happen to be of interest. And in fact, I think it would require defunding the student group in Rosenberger, which the Supreme Court said would violate that group's First Amendment rights. So it's just flatly at odds with binding Supreme Court precedent. It's not binding guidance anyway, and doesn't even require what the university did here.
Yeah. The thing that's bothered me about this, number one, you would think that a university that had a law school would be a little better about fighting some of these things. I mean, I hate to bag on somebody's law school here, but come on, man, what are we doing? But the other thing is, again, we kind of get back to the why question for me, and because it honestly does not seem as though anyone was really asking for this. That if they had just left these things alone, it's not like they were threatening funding because they were running Alice, subscriptions out there. You know what I mean? And that's the name of one of the magazines. So what is there? I guess my question is, is there an ulterior motive here? Is there some motive that's underlying? And I mean, I know this maybe not your purview of being the attorney and doing this, but it seems like there's got to be an ulterior motive here, whether it's saving money or trying to appeal to some group or some person that's at play here. Because I don't even think the Trump administration was asking for this.
Well, I will say, I think you're completely right on that last part, that this goes beyond what even the Trump administration has asked for. First of all, this policy itself is not binding. There was a similar policy put out by the Department of Education that did purport to be binding. It did say you could be defunded if you fund, DEI type things and fund groups that discriminate. That guidance has been challenged in court. Those challenges have been successful. That guidance has been enjoined by multiple federal courts. And the Department of Education has abandoned those appeals. So they're not even defending the position that the Attorney General took here, right? They've said, we're not even going to bother appealing because we're so wrong. And so, why, despite that, the university is kind of complying.
Have you heard that the Dow is over 50,000, Sam? Have you heard that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, why the university feels that nonetheless it needs to do what it did, I'm not going to speculate. But I do think, there's a lot of folks who have sort of a stereotype of what's going on, right? That they're not really paying attention to what the law actually says. They've just heard that, oh no, we can't have, any kind of student groups. And so we have, multiple examples of universities going beyond sort of what even sort of in the untrue legal position of the administration is required. Another example in Florida, which thankfully the university backed down on, but for a while they were telling the Black Student Union they couldn't use the word black, which even the university figured out that one was unreasonable. But that's why we felt like it was really important to take this case, not just for these students and these magazines, but so that we could push back against this kind of thinking at universities across.
Yeah, look, man. Thank God for all of you. I mean, and what you're doing. Listen, there's no question. But I don't understand why this. Because I feel like you're right. I feel like you're right in that there's a lot of this ambiguity that's taking place in the legal world now because the Trump administration is pushing boundaries on everything, and as Jerome said, precedent is just out the damn window. We don't care about anything that happened before, and we're just making it up as we go for the most part, and so it's just kind of a free for all in a lot of ways in the legal world now, but. I still can't wrap my head around why that somebody at the university would take them, because it seems like such a negative PR move for them. I know everything's not based on PR, but I mean, if you're trying to attract students from all over the world, this seems like such a negative move to make if you don't at least have the backing of, hey, they're making us do this. We've got to do it. And I just don't understand it.
The one question that has occurred to me is this basically going to be seen from this point going forward as the equivalent of what happened in 1963 with George Wallace sort of making this grandstand move at the University of Alabama to try to block the integration of the school? I mean, does this have almost the same kind of paradigm setting or paradigm shifting, depending upon how you want to look at it, impact?
But I certainly hope that through the litigation we can push back on that. I think what ultimately happens remains to be seen. I think certainly our students, our clients do see this as an attack on their communities, right? That these magazines were important sort of sources of community for the students who participated and who read them and who attended them. And so I think that's why they felt like it was really important to stand up to this. And I hope that if we do succeed in litigation, it will ensure that Black students and women continue to be welcome on campus, and that we don't see that kind of precedent setting.
I guess what I'm asking though is, from a symbolic standpoint, and maybe even from a functional standpoint, does this have that same kind of impact? Is it potentially as damaging, and is it portending something that perhaps could be even more damaging?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a concern. And I think others, probably who are more close to the university itself would have to speak to how likely it is that will happen. But it's definitely a concern. It's one reason why we want to stand up, in this case is to prevent those kinds of more damaging things happening, not just at the University of Alabama, but across the South, because we have seen many efforts to censor school curriculum, to silence the teaching of Black history, and all kinds of other efforts to do um, these sort of other curricular changes that are sort of steps towards resegregation in some cases. And so, yeah, I think that's why we think we're doing what we can to fight back, and how much the effect will be despite that, I don't know.
One other quick question.
Go ahead.
What's the mood of the students right now that you're representing? What is their frame of mind?
I think they're definitely happy to be fighting back. I think they're enthusiastic about standing up for their rights. I think it's scary to be litigating against your university. And there are many editors of these magazines, not all of whom are plaintiffs in the case for various different reasons. But I think it's tough, but I think they are excited and want to be standing up for their rights.
These things don't just happen, at the drop of a hat, these sorts of lawsuits. So I know that there has to have been, because this has been going on for months now. So I know there had to have been talks with university leadership about, what they were doing, why they were doing this, what was taking place here. At any point, did they realize they've got a law school that they could have talked to some people about over there? I mean, did that ever come up? I mean, could Jerome call somebody and say, "Hey, listen, I just want to let y'all know that I went to school here, and there's a law school over here that can help y'all out with some of this"?
Yeah, you'd have to ask them that, I think. I don't know, but yeah, we certainly. I mean, yeah, and they have their own lawyers. They have general counsel, presumably, who also could answer these kinds of questions. And from our perspective, the law is pretty clear. So we'll see what happens. We've just filed the lawsuit on Friday, and so or excuse me, Monday. And so we'll have to see, how they respond, and I think that remains to be seen.
Well, listen, to both of y'all, and all of SPLC, for jumping in on these things, from the SAVE Act to this, to the, we had, a couple of weeks ago, we had another attorney on who was handling things in terms of garbage collection fees, that were going on in poor communities. I mean, it's what y'all do. And we've said it before, and we're going to keep saying it. We are so very proud to have y'all as, on and talk to you about these things and have you as sponsors. And, it really is a source of pride for us to see that we're working with you and in any small way helping to do what y'all do. And we really, really appreciate you for everything that y'all are doing to bring these issues to light, to fight back against this sort of just ridiculous nonsense, and to help out the folks who need it the most. So thank y'all all for what you do and for coming on and spending a little bit of time with us today.
Absolutely. If I can make one quick plug on voting rights, on April 1st,
Absolutely.
at the Alabama State House, SPLC, along with a number of our other partner organizations, ACLU, too many others to list, will be hosting a voting rights advocacy day at the State House to uplift a lot of the pro-democracy bills that get filed every session, but for one reason or another, never make it onto a committee agenda or to the House or Senate floor. In particular, the State Voting Rights Act that was first filed last year was filed again this year. And so that will be 10:30 on the State House steps, April 1st. So would encourage any of your listeners to show up and participate, because that is certainly one of the ways that we can try and push back against some of these boneheaded policies.
Hey, absolutely. And listen, Drum, if you wouldn't mind, either you or Ricky or Kimberly, shoot me some information on that. We'll make sure that we get it published out as well in APR and wherever we can. I'll push it out on social media as well. See if we can get a good following over there and get some folks to show up and let their voices be heard. So, thank you again. Thank you guys for everything. We really do appreciate it.
Yes.
We're going to slide
Thanks
out.
for being on the front line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much.
We'll be back in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week.